So yes, welcome back. Here we are, session 6, Conversations with C&C. If this is your first time logging in, or it might not be, I'm one of the co-hosts, or one of the hosts. My name's Claude Murray, or you can call me C.
Yeah, name's Carl, another therapist, psychotherapist. Feeling blessed to be here. We're on session 6.
Session 6, Doctor.
Yes, yeah. So I think it's prudent to ask, or prevalent, should I say, to say, do we recontract?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Do we recontract for an additional 6, bro?
Yeah.
So it's blessed. As you just said, edifying and encouraged, and internally, and hoping that is transferred across. We talk about transference, but quite often it's negative transference we refer to, but positive transference. Yeah. This is what we want to carry across. The edification and encouragement and inspiration, my brother. Yeah.
So I guess your temperature check, you're saying, is in this moment you're feeling blessed.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And it has been commented upon this morning. You see, I got the background here. I know I don't look old enough to be in Vietnam. You know what I mean? But I come prepared to fight the good fight. Yeah. And just, as I say, just encourage our listeners as we encourage ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Doc, Vietnam, I'm seeing it, man. You're ready for war. Me and G, the coach, we were saying earlier on, it's reminiscence of Capone and Noriega's War Report 1997 debut album. I guess, what's been happening? Because it's,
it's been a minute.
Yeah.
We, just preparation has been the word for September. Preparation, planning, getting myself recalibrated for the new work. That really begins in earnest next week, induction week, students coming in, meeting them for the first time, setting the scene. So looking forward, overjoyed to have this new opportunity to step out. Step out in faith and do it, and do the thing that I do. So I'm hearing excitement.
Great expectations.
And
almost like can't wait to meet your new cohort of students that you'll be journeying with.
Looking forward. So, and how about you, sir? Temperature check.
Temperature check. In the here and now, I feel pretty chilled. The morning was a bit chaotic. But I just feel like getting here, just being here in the space. It's just great to always be here, connecting with the brothers, connecting with yourself. I guess I was saying to someone the other day, there's been like some transitional changes. Son's just started reception. I've, started the new role. I'm 3 weeks into the family therapist role. My wife's got a job, a brand new job. So all three of us are having these these changes. So we always knew it was going to be a season of change. So it's almost like we're trying to find a rhythm, because we're like a week into this I guess this new season of newness for all of us, individually then collectively. So I feel like it's like two people who've never danced before, on the dance floor. They see each other. You're trying to find the groove. So just in that process of finding that steady spot. But for the most part, I'm well. New roles going really good. A lot of training. Done a few courses already. Really, really excited to be able to facilitate dialogue and change with the families that I'm going to be collaborating with. So that fills me with I guess some really some expectation, some good expectations, and I've met my new team, so we're all new to the department. So it feels like we've been speaking about the changes in previous episodes, changes coming up for us, and now I am in the reality of those changes. So feel good, feel excited, and just that first day, Azriel going to school in his uniform. We had to take that photo, like as parents do, and it was just great, just being like, oh wow, the journey that he's been on at nursery. Now he's at, school in his little uniform, and all is well. And just being creative outside of the workspace with various other little projects that, I'll touch on in maybe, future episodes when the time's right. But the soul is well. The soul is well. Soul is well.
I like that. Yeah.
Well.
So I guess it leads us on to, our topic. Our topic for today, and, having had a discussion a few evenings ago, and what direction do we go in, just being transparent with the listeners and the watchers. And we thrashed it out, and it was such a good conversation. And I guess with our conversations, we find that here it's an extension of
that's correct.
Those conversations. So just thinking of the session title, the strap line of Observations of a Survivor. Wow.
But that just needs to breathe for a minute. Observations of a survivor. Yeah.
So it's rich. There's depth.
Yeah.
There is the explicit and the implicit within what we are going to discuss.
Yeah.
And I just thought you could lead us off with that, observations of a survivor. And what that entails.
Yeah. So I guess you got observations, which is the outlook, which is what someone has seen, which is, observing, looking, taking in your surroundings, which can impact your viewpoint, your perspective. And then you've got the surviving, right? So something has had to have happened for you to be a survivor. You've had to have gone through something or overcame something to be on the other side.
Yeah. So as we would say in the vernacular, we say in the hood, we would say what had happened was.
Literally, and sometimes when things happen and people survive, it's usually, or a lot of times, something traumatic or tragic or something that could be life-changing, or a turning point or a turnaround kind of incident. So I guess with that, just kind of unpacking that, I know we did this on session 1, and I think it's pretty apt to do. Jumping in a time machine, bam. I want to say 1980s. What comes to mind for you?
1980s. Wow. You know what? I would have been in my 20s. In my 20s in the 1980s. And I tell you, there's so much that is jammed in to that period of time. Hit 20 years of age, 84. And I guess we talked about this, and it was 79, 80 coming into hip hop. The Fat Boys. The just that sound, the breakdance and all, just everything that was. I wasn't living in New York at that time. I was a few hundred miles up the road in D.C. and say D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and that particular area, and but it was rich along the East Coast. What was happening, and you just could, for me, just reflecting on it, you could just tell then that this is something that's different. This is something that's that is just transcending, time, transcending my experience as a young person. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and also identity. identity being a real thing, and you know the hormonal changes going on during that time, man child, you know, so much feelings and emotions going on. You know, what was happening in the family home, what was happening on the road, and just trying to find a sense of myself and where I fit within that. But looking at it. Looking at, you know, the emergence of hip hop, you know, not knowing, you know, some of the commentators of the time thinking, oh, this thing ain't gonna last. You know, so it's a flash in the pan sort of thing.
It's seen as a phase and a fad, right? Like,
exactly.
This will wear out in a bit.
And you know, as was it my man said, Cagney said, you know, look at me now, Ma, top of the world. That is what it is today. You know, it is something that has blown the mind of those commentators from back in the day. That they couldn't even fathom what would be happening. You know, how it's, you know, how many billionaires have emerged as a result of this of hip hop. And its beginnings, should I say. So being around during that time and seeing, you know, what was happening, and then the emergence of I say drugs within the community. Not only, you know, we have talked a lot about the Black community, and this is what it is. It's race therapy culture, absolutely. But I maintain that generations were lost. Within the 80s as a result of the epidemic that was crack cocaine. And is crack cocaine.
Can you unpack that a bit?
Well, speaking from my own frame, I would say, you know, coming into adulthood in the 80s and seeing, you know, the relationships that I had with, you know, my friendship group and those who succumbed to that narcotic. And as a result of that, you know, lives were lost. Some who went into, you know, being that runner, being on the front line. And I can tell you, when they say generations lost, through the loss of life, through incarceration, through their mental health, you know, the decimation of, you know, their mental health, you know, the family breakdown, I mean, it's just not the one thing. There's so many different variables within and how it's touched so many lives as a result. I can't think of anyone from that particular group that it didn't affect some strand of their life as they've gone through. And when we unpacked, you know, when we said the observations, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and then we looked at it from, you know, survivors' guilt, if you will, and then coming up with that title, of, you know, observations of a survivor, that there is, how in the world did you and I make it out? And I won't say how do we make it out unscathed, because there are vestiges, there are traces of, you know, and I think when you think of the vestiges and traces, that's why we sit here today as therapists, as psychotherapists. You know, it's that understanding of what has gone back then. You know, what's going on back then. What we're doing right here in this moment in time is for me is a direct result of what happened back then, because we've gone through that process and we've looked at that pain, you know, close up and personal, and made sense of it for ourselves, you know, and it comes down to acceptance as well. Accepted it for ourselves, and it's healing within that process. I think I'm free.
No. That's good. This is a free space. You know, this is, you know, when we're in a therapeutic space, it's there's that freedom, right? So we're not confined or have any constraints. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of, you know, the few bits that I do know about, you know, America at that time. You know, so I'm thinking of Reaganomics. I'm thinking of the war on drugs.
Yes.
I'm thinking on how black men were viewed as predators.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
the extensive, excessive sentences.
Yeah.
You know, that black people were given for possession of, you know, crack.
Yeah.
In contrast to, you know, individuals, white individuals who maybe would have cocaine on them.
Yeah.
And the communities being flooded, people constrained in tower blocks.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm thinking of, you know, UK. So when you mention your age, I'm, you know, in the 80s, I'm a kid, you know, and I'm thinking of the community spirit and community vibe that we had, and there was a real strong sense of solidarity.
Right.
You know, so if you needed, you know, whatever you needed, your next door neighbor would hook you up. There was no pride, there was no shame. You knew each other's names. You know, if money was low, you could go to the shop and, you know, we didn't say boss man, but like, you know, we would have known the shopkeeper's name, and it would tick us. Yeah. You know, and there was just this real looking out for each other. Where auntie down the road, if she saw me doing something I shouldn't be doing, she could pull me up, and it wouldn't be like, oh, you can't chat to me. Like, she had permission. You know, so there was this real community collective of, you know, coming together. And a lot of our families, you know, were thrown on into tower blocks and estates, and you know, in your context it would be housing projects. You know, so bodies on top of bodies. You know,
literally.
You know, and we made the best out of it. You know, and I think, so when I think of the 80s, real good time. You know, thinking of Rare Groove and, you know, Top and the Pops, you know, pop music, pop culture, you know, and just being free, young and free, and just running around without a care in the world, and, you know, playing football, and then, you know, someone's mum would come and, oh, you got to go home now, and it's almost like she's just changed the, you know, changed the context of the football match, and you got to go home. It was just a real, like, for me, I think of the 80s fondly, and it fills me with much joy. You know, Kevin Arnold and the Wonder Years, and, you know, just, you know, a different world with Dwayne Wayne, and, you know, watching the Cosby Show, and, you know, just so much. Just being that little kid and going to school, but around, you know, unaware, there is a darker world happening around. And, you know, I remember seeing my friend, or, you know, on the way to school, you know, and there was this family, and I never understood, but I just always felt that house just feels a little bit, you know, and, you know, years later finding out that, you know, both mum and dad were hooked on, you know, crack cocaine, but I wouldn't have known that at the time. So there's this, much as there's this community spirit and community vibe, you know, there are issues happening in the community, and drugs is ravaging, you know, savaging the community, and, you know, people are making money from it, and if people are making money from it, then people are buying it, and the people that are buying it are being impacted immensely. You know, so some people got really rich, but it did at the time. You know, I don't think anyone would see the devastation, you know, down the line. So I think if we even backtrack before we were having this community vibe in the 80s as a community, and this get together, like we you know, we think of the Windrush, like, you know, many of my peers and counterparts, our parents are, you know, the Windrush era, and they came here and would have had to deal with their trauma, you know, that they would have shielded us from, you know, protected us from, and, you know, the no blacks, you know, no Irish and no dogs, you know. I know people that, you know, came from the Caribbean, you know, that, you know, in faith tried to go to a church or various, you know, community projects and being told that you can't come in here. What?
By the vicar, by the
reverend, like, you know, so, you know, our when I think of like my mum's generation, so they, you know, dealing with some very traumatic experiences that they protected us from, you know. And
again, within that, that's layered.
It's layered.
Because you're leaving your indigenous home to come here, whether it was as a child, as a teenager, adolescent, or as an adult. You're leaving what you know, you're leaving those relationships, and you're coming over here quite often trying to ingratiate yourself into a new relationship or form new relationships, and then feeling that you're not accepted. And then therein lies the attachment, the attachment issues that will develop as a result of that. And I think, you know, just picking up on that theme of that solidarity in the community, you know, my wife, you know, and her family, she always recounts how, you know, for her as a child, them having like this Victorian house and how it was just filled with different families. Such and such was on the top floor. You didn't go mess with them. You know, you didn't go mess with him. He was a single man. He was a serious dude. The family on the second floor. You know, how many rug racks did they have? You know what I mean? All of the, you know, the different stories that she recounts, but very much. It was organization. It was solidarity. It was, as you say, looking out for one another. And then, okay, they don't want to let us in. Let us do our own thing. And then coming together as that small community, buying a church. And different, you know, different families coming together. And she's like, you know, my dad being one of the men that helped build the baptismal pool, and that, you know, that's the type of things that she recounts from her childhood as a result of, you know, what happened, what transpired. And I think also the next level is the transgenerational issues that develop as a result. So what the family. Those families, you know, from the Windrush, 40s, 50s, 60s, they come over and they're doing their thing. The kids are born, but you feel that. You feel, because when we also know you don't talk about that stuff. That's right. You ain't got time to be, you know, thinking about the past and thinking about what we're experiencing right now. I need to go make this bread. I need to feed my family. I need to do all of the things that a man and a woman need to do in order to survive. Survival, there it is again, right?
100%.
So they did that. You're not talking about it. And then, you know, the kids come along. Don't do that. Well, there's no why you don't do something. You just don't do it. So there's no explanation. There's no conversation. It's just... You do as I say. Don't be asking me no questions. What's wrong with you?
As you say that, I just got triggered off a thought. Like, so, makes me think of my granddad. He, you know, became a minister in the church, and, you know, God bless his soul. He's no longer here. But I remember him, you know, hearing stories that he came over, you know, from Jamaica, short, stout. You know, strong man, and obviously massive culture shock coming to England. So he's here. Things are not going as, you know, you know, we were told or anticipated. And then one day, I think the oppressive environment just got too much, and he flipped out on a bus driver, pulled out a knife, and you know, and you know, eventually had to go to court, and you know, the church came in and, you know, supported him, and he built some strong relationships, and his life turned around after that. And but I was just wondering what was going on for him, you know, as we talk about leaving your homeland. There's that separation, there's that loss, expectations not being met when you come here, and then not feeling accepted, you know, being treated as different, being looked upon, you know. it's not like our people were coming from like nothing. Many people, you know, had qualifications. People,
yes,
you know,
yes.
it's not like we were looking for handouts. It's like, you know, our people were coming as esteemed, you know,
highly educated,
highly educated, esteemed individuals, and I just felt, I just tried to imagine what was Granddad going through, you know, and for him, you know, maybe his way of trying to survive was, you know, carrying a knife, and you know, who knows what was happening to him in the streets when he was walking in the communities, being black. You know, you got, you know, these racist groups, and it just makes me think. So even before Windrush, we, you know, we don't have a long time for the session, but there's historical trauma.
Yes,
you know. Slavery, you know, post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yes,
you know, and if anybody ever wants to kind of unpack that, you know, on a deeper level, there's a fantastic author by the name of Dr. Joy DeGruy.
Yes,
she has a fantastic book. Google her. And she's got a lot of stuff online that
on YouTube.
Really,
she breaks it down. She breaks it down.
Yeah.
Quite. And you know, in a humorous, real, authentic way. Yeah, she's an amazing author and teacher.
Yeah,
I would say. Yeah.
So, lecturer, qualified, qualifications coming out of her ears. So if you want to unpack that a little bit more, and it's really contextualized, do check that out. And it's funny when we were just speaking about the tower blocks and the housing projects, it made me just, as I was sitting here, think of the cotton fields. Then it made me think of the slave ships. Bodies on bodies.
There you go.
Cotton fields all crammed together. You know, so and in those moments having to find ways to be strong. You know, having to find ways to stay alive, you know.
By holding on to your humanity.
Yeah.
Right, when you're not looked on as being a human, but holding on to your humanity. And at the same time, I would also posit that it's something around the forgiveness as well. Because as a people, there's still, it's there. I don't get that sense of bitterness, of hatred. You know, as a people. So yeah, there's something quite poignant in what you're sharing there. And
so that's almost like, you know, a timeline, right? We just a few little junctions.
Yeah.
You know, but it's so much trauma that has impacted our community.
Yeah.
You know, and then we get to the 80s. Introduction of crack cocaine, you know, and so much other things, guns being placed into our communities.
Mandatory minimums.
Unpack that, Doc. What, for the listeners who don't know what that means.
Well, the mandatory minimum would have been something, I believe it would have been the Clinton regime, because it was, you know, as I recounted, I believe in session 1, you know, around the you know, D.C. being the murder capital at that time, and so how do you combat that? How do you? Because, you know, come on, you have to keep it real. There were some bad cats out there, and they would, you know, they were taking each other out left, right, and center, and they had the weaponry to do it, you know, with effectiveness. So they said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to come up with these laws, this legislation that is going to try to eradicate that, you know, this war on drugs, something that Nancy and Ron, Big Ron, introduced. Just say no, and then Clinton comes into office, mandatory minimums. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it would have been something that was from an idea of Hillary that was supported by Bill. Yeah. And as a result of that, if you were caught, I forget the amount, but if you were caught with a minuscule amount of crack, you could be looking at 50 years. Whereas, you know, the dude around the corner who was selling white, he could have an 8-ball and get a year. You know what I mean? And I will tell you that there's some cats still probably doing those bids today, from the early '90s to today. And with when you think about parole, and that's the thing, when you have that license. And you come out of the joint and you still got that hanging over your head, and then you walk across the street, you jaywalk. You do something that's not copacetic. You can end up right back in, going through that same cycle again, because you have this particular number over your head. Yeah. And during that time, just a little bit, going a little bit further, those people who were really in the mix, who committed murder and got those 3, 4, 5, and 6 and 7 year, seven life sentences. They're still, super max. Maxed out. So survivors, now in that context, there's no survivor's guilt, because I, even during that time, I made a conscious decision that wasn't an avenue that I was going to go down, because I could just see that money, that lifestyle, even though the flamboyance, I would go to these, like these go-go raves. Go-go music was big in DC. Go through one of these raves, and you see the cats. Dressed to the nines, Gucci down. You know what I mean? They was doing their thing, but it's what came with that. What came with that was watching the bodies drop when the next set came in, and you guys ain't the relationship that you have is not it's not kosher. So as a result of you having that relationship, things came on top. So being in that environment and watching how things unraveled. I just couldn't be a party to it myself. So making that decision to step away.
So making a life-changing decision. To not be caught up in the whirlwind and a hurricane.
It was a hurricane
of turmoil and tragedy. It makes me think of, over here we had Margaret Thatcher and everything that the Iron Lady, brought, and the almost like the war on quote unquote, immigrants. So the 90s, I'm a teenager, and again there's still that community vibe, but now my eyes are opening up and I'm starting to see, oh wow, so this is what's really going on. This is what mum's always tried to protect me from. You're seeing the drug paraphernalia. Your friend's dad, is strung out, high, constantly, or drunk. So seeing, alcohol, seeing that deadly concoction, undiagnosed mental health issues.
Wow.
But unaware, like, the true impact that it is happening, having. And, and so much other stuff in the 90s, so much great moments. But, when I just think of, like, the relationship with the police and Stephen Lawrence and, the racism, the BNP, the NF, and just the traumatic experiences that were taking place, and we've got our community, rising up and people doing, some prominent things, and, you got your people speaking out. And then 2000s, there's more, more issues. So, that so much that we could talk on, but I guess so little time. So I think with that said, so we kind of touched on some macro experiences that have been happening and ourselves in that. And And I think for me, speaking from the I, as a man of the community who is for the community, came from the community, I'm a part of the community. From time to time, I see people that I know who have been impacted by life. We started off in the sandpit together. We would play football together and imagine that we were, Pele, Maradona, Ian Wright, John Barnes. And, when I see them now and, knowing that what life has done to them, or maybe some of the decisions that they have made in life. Because you mentioned about the choice that you chose to make. So sometimes there are choices that we make, but not realizing the impact of those choices, right? It's like sometimes we go in. I sometimes look at choices like a swimming pool, right? So you put your foot in the water, and the water's at your ankles, and the further you get, sometimes the water you're now in the deep end, and sometimes that's like our choices. The more detrimental choices that we're making, we might not even be aware.
That's right.
And then now we're in the deep end. But I just say that to say, like, the other day, seeing someone that, I felt like, there's some stuff I did in the community when I need to take some ownership and be transparent. There's some things I did in the community that wasn't healthy. And when I see individuals in the community, we have a relationship because there was a certain point in time where, as you say, copacetic, I wasn't living correctly. I was doing whatever I was doing to get by. And so there's this bond that me and some individuals have. And this one guy, every time he sees me, he's a few years older than me, people will frown on him and look at him dressed however he's dressed, and every time I see him, I feel an element of guilt. I feel an element of guilt. And he greets me with open arms. Everyone's walking past him, and he's wondering, am I going to shake his hand? I'll give him a hug. Like, there's this moment. We just share this powerful moment. And just sometimes walking through my community. So that's like one example. But there are times I'm walking through my community and just seeing people and individuals, and just feeling this sense of like sadness at times. And, why me? How come I made it out? I think there's that saying, there goes I, but the grace of God, right? But just like, and living with that, and holding that at times, whether that's some commuting or driving through. I'm always reminded of maybe sometimes the part I played, but even not the parts I played, but making it out and knowing that there are individuals that have been impacted. And I feel that sometimes I wonder, is that a guilt that I'm gonna? Is that my guilt that I will hold forever? Just
But isn't it something that, Brother C, about the decisions and the choices that you made back then, and the man that you've become today, and accepting that those are the choices that you made because, man-child. You perhaps didn't know, didn't consciously think about those choices, those actions that you took. So we get to this stage of the gifting and what you've done with the choices that you've made in adulthood. And I think that those choices that you've made, I mean, you still being in your community and wanting to perhaps right those wrongs and provide a better outcome today as a family therapist for the families that you're going to impact, you're going to meet, you're going to therapeutically change their lives, or help facilitate that change. So there's a rhyme and reason for you surviving. So now we get to the acceptance.
Yeah.
And how do you, when it comes to your mind, that what is the part that I played? Well, if God has forgiven you, why haven't you forgiven yourself?
And that's profound, because I think, there's that concept, and we know that everyone listening might not have a belief, and that's, that's fine.
Yeah.
For us in this space, we do have a belief. And I hold on to that. I can hang my hat on to that. I totally believe and believe that God has forgiven me. I have forgiven myself. But there are just moments when your past, your past interrupts your present. So you could be on your present commute, and there's just it's a fleeting moment, or it might be an image that pops up. And I think that was profound, like in because you might forgive yourself. You believe
excuse me.
You believe the Father's forgiven you, but then there's man.
Yeah.
And I remember going to do a level 2.
Okay.
Counselling course. Early. And it must have been about 2011. So as I said in session 2, did the level 1. I've gone onto the course. They ask you to complete, your paperwork, your questionnaire, and then there's a question about, previous convictions. I complete it accordingly. I put what I should put. I disclose I have some previous convictions from my teenage years. At this time, I've been a practitioner in the sector now for maybe 7-8 years. So now, completed the form, I've got to meet the tutor, just for a little introduction. And the tutor says to me, "Are you still in a gang?" She asked me, I didn't put on the paperwork I was ever in a gang. And I was like, do you know when it just feels like your past is being just, A, like she just had no cultural competency. B, I don't even think she saw me as a human being in the vet. She saw what was on the paper. And that happens with a lot of our I could go off on a tangent here, but happens with a lot of our young black men who are in front of the judge. They get this piece of paper, and it's got maybe some criminal convictions, and they don't see the person as a human. And I felt like, how are you going to ask me after 8 years being in the sector of facilitating and working with people, am I in a gang? And I just remember, I can't even remember my response. Like I was so shocked, and I just felt like in that moment, I'm not saying she was the system, but she did represent a component of the system's perspective. And I felt judged, and I felt like I hadn't been forgiven. Though I'm forgiven myself, and believe God has forgiven me. But yeah, so when you said that, it just triggered that, and that was from a choice and from a choice and decision standpoint. I could have been like, this sector's not for me.
Yeah.
Could
have changed the trajectory.
Yeah. So I looked around the room. No one looked like me. I'm not even talking about height, but like no one of my hue, my ethnicity. And then the gatekeeper, because she was a gatekeeper. I won't expose the college. And I could have been like, this is not for me. But obviously, that's not how I operate, But yeah, so sometimes the trauma that we have been through, and when we have changed our lives, sometimes society can still rub it in your face.
Yes. Even when you have as they say, paid your debt to society. They still want to use it as a measuring stick in which to beat you with. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that just kind of triggered off that stream of consciousness.
That is so on point. And so true. And so true. Because we talk about that's something that I share with students in level 4, year 1, that conscious competency. Yeah, but it sounds as though this particular tutor, you talk about unconscious, the unconscious incompetency. That we know that within a lot of these counseling schools that that is what you're getting a lot of times is some of that unconscious incompetency, and then you're promoting it onto or projecting it onto students, and you're finding out that once they become qualified, they're operating as well within that unconscious incompetency, and the damage that is done as a result of that. Where's the non-beneficence? Where's the...
What does that mean, sir? Well, I'm a word nerd. I need to know what that means.
That's our ethical principle, from the BACP. So that ethical principle of doing no harm. Doing no harm, and beneficence, having the best interests of the client at heart. It's and then if you have that, then you're able to offer autonomy. You're allowing them to be in that space. The self-respect, the trustworthiness, the justice, all of those principles. They are factors, and I believe that's what when you become a counselor, that is the things that you want to embody. You want to embody and perhaps hopefully come into the vocation with some of that in you. But it's something that you want to project and promote, as principles that, you abide by.
So we know that survivor's guilt or survivor syndrome, as it's known as, comes as a result of someone surviving a traumatic experience. So I guess, I shared a little bit about myself. Maybe just for the listeners, it might be good for us maybe just to unpack a little bit, because someone might be dealing with that right now. And I know we're nobody's therapist. That's we said that from the onset, and we're not here to tell people what to do. But it might be helpful if there were a few, I guess, nuggets of like people that maybe are feeling that way or dealing with some form of survivor's guilt, like what a couple things that they could do to keep themselves healthy, or to kind of keep themselves, to help them through that, I guess. And
I guess it was, the nugget. One of the nuggets that comes to mind is, we think about our emotions, and sometimes our emotions are buried alive. How can your emotions be buried alive? And that is through what you've experienced. So in order, as we recount it from, our forefathers, our parents, grandparents, great grandparents, grandparents, moms, pops, all the, siblings, whatever we've gone through, sometimes in order to survive, in order to get through, we bury those emotions. We don't deal with them. And I believe it comes a time where you have to deal with the emotion, or it will deal with you. So as a consequence of that, you seek help. You seek help if you're struggling with your mental health. You seek help in the context of trying to resolve those issues the best way you can. And we've said it before, when you think about our community, it's not something that is normally done. But I would say in this day and age, I'm seeing more and more young people taking up that challenge, that chalice, if you will, of talking about what's going on for them, and questioning, thinking about and challenging the status quo, challenging the powers that be, and talking about what's going on internally for them. So perhaps for those in your age range, my age range, where maybe they haven't sought counseling before, maybe it's something to to give it a chance, and also thinking, if you've had an experience before that was negative, you can't sit on that one experience, because I know a number of people who've had that experience of they went to this counselor, they weren't seen, they weren't heard, they weren't listened to, and they think counseling is rubbish. It's rubbish. You may need to see not only some people are very lucky, they see the first person, boom, they get me. Maybe you need to see 2 or 3. And it's like, when you go into, the metaphor, you're going to, you go to the doctor and perhaps his opinion, you don't really agree with his opinion. You go to the next one. You have to get different opinions. And something that I was talking about this week was the working alliance. And the working alliance is thus my reasonable side, as a therapist, your reasonable side as a client, coming together to work together, so that when perhaps negative things come up, we're able to work together, because you've come to trust that I have your best interests at heart. So it is about working through and developing that working alliance, so that we can meet. Just have that meeting where you can trust it. Safe to unsafe. Safe to unsafe.
No, that's profound. So I'm hearing them finding a space to actually speak about what has been buried. I think of I'd call it the triple A. So I think sometimes first is the awareness. This has happened. The acknowledgement.
Okay.
This has happened. But sometimes some people stay at that first A. Then the second A is what you referenced earlier, acceptance. I've got to accept that this has happened. And sometimes the trajectory between acknowledgement and acceptance can take a day or can take a lifetime. So then when I accept what's happened, and sometimes that may happen before you get into the counselling room, and then you might unpack that in the counselling room potentially.
Yes.
But you got to go from acknowledging and not burying, then accepting this has taken place, accepting this is how it's made me feel, accepting this is how it's impacting me. And then the next step, I believe, is action. What are some of the actions that I need to put into place to be able to work through this? And again, that might be about speaking to someone. That might be about putting certain measures in your life to protect yourself and, your well-being. So I would say, I'll dare to say, acknowledging, accepting, and action. And the onus is on the individual, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And who you draw in is really important. But the onus is on you.
That's quite poignant. I like the 3 A's. Acknowledgement, acceptance, and
action.
Action. And that's the thing. I think with action, because a lot of times, as you say, it can be, especially from that acknowledgement to acceptance, as you say, rightly say, a day to a lifetime. And sometimes we sit on that acceptance without taking the action. And say, the students this week, checking in, saying, some of them saying, well, I've thought about counseling for so long.
Yes.
So many years I was going to do this thing.
Yeah.
And, and today I find myself 10 years later, I find myself on level 4 and look at that from acknowledging to accepting to thinking, okay, action. Yeah. So that's just one example.
Yeah.
It's just one example, but thinking that I know that there are a number of clients that I've had, and I'm talking, plus, I won't say how many hours, but I know it's plus 1,000 clinical hours.
Come on.
Yeah, plus.
Yeah.
And I would tell you a lot of my clients have that acknowledgement. And perhaps coming into counseling at that phase, acknowledging. So we're talking about, what's the cycle of change? The cycle of change being pre-contemplation, whereas I don't even know. I ain't got no problem. You got the problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then getting to that contemplation stage, whereas, okay, that's the acknowledgement, right? I need to do something about this thing. And then going around, contemplation, making a decision, action. You know what I mean? And then that maintenance cycle, lapse, relapse, maintenance cycle.
Yeah.
So yeah. I hear that.
And I think as we sit here, it feels like there's been different battles, different war zones.
You see me there?
Yeah. Different trials, challenges, moments of madness.
Yeah.
That I, yourself, if I could say that, have had to go through or work through that was happening around us.
Yeah.
And how you're dressed today, I think, is pretty apt, and maybe a symbol and signifies that it has been a war. There has been a war on our people. I would dare to say that we're still fighting through and working through. But if I speak from the I think what your attire represents some of the wars and challenges that I've had to go through. And here I am today, as a survivor, and not just surviving and, trying to make it, like, really being able to stand from a place of I made it through and I'm not what happened to me, and I think sometimes people may need to take that in and let that digest, like whatever may have had happened to you, you're not that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, through the grace of God and friends and support, I feel like I've been through the fire, but I don't smell like smoke. I've been through the fire. There might be a few little burnt marks and a few little scars, but I don't smell like what I've been through, and I don't look like what I've been through. And
well said. Yeah. Well said. Yeah.
And when you share your age, when you have shared your age, humbly, you don't look like anything that you've been through.
Yeah.
And this is beyond the, that age-old kind of like joke that black doesn't crack, and there's obviously grace, which we acknowledge.
Yeah. Amen.
But we stand in a place with our feet firmly in the ground, because it could have been so different.
Amen to that.
The story could have been so different, but those challenges and trials that have happened weren't our full stops. There might have been a pause, there may have been a comma, but the story hadn't finished, and the story's not finished as we continue. So I think those are, just as I feel like we're winding down.
Yeah.
Those are just a few of my, I guess, reflections that we These are just some of our observations. Yeah, man, we're not just survivors, we're more than conquerors. Yeah, is what I would go on to. That would be the extension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. What
My
you sitting
brother,
with?
you have encapsulated it very well. Very well, what we have discussed today, the survival, the nature of survival, observations of surviving what we have went through. And I love that, yes, smoke and fire, but I don't smell like it. I don't smell like it. And I'm glad that you don't smell like it, because I don't see it on you, either. And I wonder, I wonder how some of those individuals that I've come up with that had succumbed, if they had, if I had said to them back then, back then, if I had said to them back then, let's reason, let me come into, where you're at right now. But see, I didn't have that knowledge, nor did I have that understanding. I was, very much single-minded, and I need to do something for self. I need to do something for myself. And that's the thought that's with me right now. I wonder, because I've only have one contact from back then, and we still tight. He's been over here. You know what I mean? And we reminisce hard. But he made it. And when I tell you that we worked at this hotel together. His people were quite well known, notorious. We would do a shift, finish at 11 o'clock at night, and go across town to the Strip. And be in the cut. And enough times having to, when things start flying over your head, having to break camp. And just and when we talk about those times, it's like, what were we thinking? But now both professional men, professional men who have made it for all intents and purposes, have made it, but have a different perspective. And you know what it is? You said the word. It is only through grace, unmerited favor. Because I didn't even know back then that I had it. But today, to know that I have it, and that it was given unto me even back then, that's why I'm here today.
I just want to big up Simeon, who I saw the other day. We had a brief conversation, and just inspired that when I see people from the past, we can just connect and still have our faculties.
Amen. That's so true.
So listeners, thank you for logging in. Again, it's been an enriching conversation.
Revelation.
As always.
Revelation.
Some deep, good dialogue as usual. And we'll see you for the next session.
Yes.
Have a great week.
Take care, people.
Take care.
Take care.